Hey friends, if you're new to the channel, my name is Gauri and I'm a software engineer here in Singapore. Today we're going to be talking about my NUS computer engineering degree. I'm going to be taking you through the modules that I liked, I didn't like, and I hated. So let's go. I studied at the National University of Singapore from 2015 to 2019. So I was technically the batch of 2019. I was part of a hybrid program where I was both in the computing faculty and I was also technically in the engineering faculty as well. The computing faculty itself offers a wide range of degrees to choose from. When narrowing down to what degree I wanted to take, I kind of narrowed down to computer science and computer engineering. If you're confused, like how I was when I started as a freshman, the main difference in very simplistic terms between computer science and computer engineering is that computer science basically focuses a lot on the software side of things, while in computer engineering we learned both hardware and software at the same time. If you are confident that you want to pursue a career as a software engineer, or you only want to focus on the software side of things, I would definitely recommend to just go for computer science, because in computer engineering we didn't learn software with as much depth as you would have as a computer science student. But if you're not so sure between software and hardware and you just want to try things out, I think computer engineering is the perfect path to go, because you can always just take modules from both faculties and then figure out at the end of the degree if you want to pursue a software career or if you want to pursue a hardware career. With that being said, I also want to point out that there is quite a bit of overlap in terms of modules taken between computer science students and computer engineering students. Or at least that's how it was back then. So that's why some of the modules I mentioned will still be relevant to you if you only want to pursue computer science. 4 years worth of modules is quite long to talk about, so I'm going to break this up into 4 sections. I'm just going to go through year by year the different types of modules I took. I won't talk about every single module. We'll just focus on those that were highlights to me and those that I learned the most from, or that I wouldn't recommend at all. Let's start with year 1. So year 1 contained a lot of foundational computing modules. As an engineering/computing student, it was very important for me to take these foundational modules because these modules were prerequisites. And not just that, if I didn't understand these, I would not be able to comprehend what's happening in the higher level modules. The first programming module I took was CS 1010. It was supposed to be a programming methodology mod. This was taught in C, and I most definitely had no experience in C before. In fact, this is the first proper programming language I learned. And okay, back then I was like, oh, this is so annoying. But now when I look back, I'm very glad that I learned C first, because after learning C, every other language feels like an upgrade. The other programming module that I took in my first year was CS 1020, which was supposed to be a data structures and algorithms module. I don't think this is taught anymore, because when I talk to juniors, I think they combine 1010 and 2010 together to form a one module that teaches everything. But to me, this was really, really important, because now that I work as a software engineer, learning data structures and algorithms is like key, and I don't think I can do my job if I hadn't taken this module. The module was in Java, and it was my first time learning Java. Because this was basically an introductory module to data structures and algorithms, we learned things like graphs, queues, stacks, heaps, sorting algorithms, search algorithms. This module had a ton of labs, and I clearly remember myself loving the lab so much. Along with that, in my year 1, I also had to take engineering modules. Because I was also part of the engineering faculty, I had to take math modules that were from engineering. So we had to take MA 1505, MA 1506. These are crazy math modules. Now when I look back, I don't really think learning those things made a difference to my life now. We learned things like Fourier series, integrals, surface integrals, derivatives. I think I also didn't really like the module as much because it was not very concept heavy. And I prefer modules where they teach us a concept and you must understand the concept in depth, and that's when you can just apply this to practical situations. I like that. This was, just a lot of mugging and not very enjoyable. But that being said, I understand why this was taught, because if you need to know this to be able to do some of the theoretical physics modules in the future, or like other engineering modules might require this level of math. Computer engineering did not. Along with math modules for the engineering side of things, we also had to take electrical modules, so like physics mods. And those talked a lot about circuitry, electrics. I can understand why those were relevant, because we also had to take quite a few electrical engineering mods in the future. So knowing or recapping knowledge about circuitry and stuff was quite relevant. So these were fun modules, but they did feel a lot like A-level physics and A-level math combined. Between year 1 and year 2, I also took a summer module, which is what we call orbital, and it gave students the ability to be able to do an independent project in pairs, or I'm not sure if you can do it individually, but you just have to do a project. It can be to solve a problem that you see or create a cool product using technology. You can do software, hardware, and at the end of the summer, you basically have to set up a booth in an exhibition and present whatever project you did. Okay, so my friend and I basically wanted to create this app that would solve a problem that I was having, which is I would always get confused about which was the fastest route to get from one place on campus to the other. And this is specific to the internal buses that were on campus. Those buses were not on Google Maps or anything like other public SMRT buses were. So I couldn't use existing technologies to figure out which bus I should take. And as a freshman, this was quite irritating. I think now they definitely have an app that already exists that helps you do that. It even tells you which bus is coming when. Back then, it either didn't exist or I didn't know about it and it existed. So I decided to create it. And we wanted to create a mobile app first. So we started with Android because someone told us that Android was easier than iOS. And I remember spending 3 days on Android Studio and looking at all of the YouTube tutorials out there, and yeah, gave up after 3 days. And I was like, it's okay, let's just create a mobile web app. That took me 1 day. And we presented it during the exhibition. There are like 3 tiers that you can fall under in rank, and we were in the 2nd tier, so that was like pretty good for the effort we put in. And it was a really cool project because it reinstated the reason why I went into this degree and how enjoyable it was to solve real life problems with technology. I really enjoyed that part of things. Okay, so year 2. Let's talk about the programming modules first. The first programming module I took, or one that was a big highlight for me, was my software engineering module. This was the first ever software engineering module I took. The way the module was structured back then was that the first few weeks you would be given individual assignments. They would basically teach us things like GitHub. I had no idea how to use GitHub back then. And source tree. How do you commit things on GitHub? How do you push? How do you branch out? What is the concept of branching out? This is all the things that the software engineering module taught us. I think week 4 onwards, we were all split up into teams of 4, and each team was responsible for enhancing an application that the tutors provided us with. So they provided us with this basic app. It was like a Java application, and we could either make use of it as a reference, or we could program something from scratch ourselves. The main aim that we had to meet was that it had to be a to-do list or a task manager. Every Thursday, we would have to present what were the new features that we had created, what were the enhancements that we made to the app. This module was quite life-changing to me because the process was very difficult. It was one of the most time-consuming, hardest, frustrating modules I've ever taken in NUS, but it was one that told me to pursue software engineering because I enjoyed that module so much. Debugging was such a pain, but I realized that I was enjoying the process so much, and when things worked, and at the end when we presented our final project, it was a feeling that I cannot comprehend. Like being able to create something from scratch that others can actually use was a great feeling to have. This module was actually a pair module, so it was taught alongside this other communications module in computing as well called CS 101. If you are able to communicate well, or at least just present decently, I think it would be a pretty easy module for you. It also focused a lot on why you should choose the features that you are doing, how would they impact on the user, understanding user stories, use cases, which at that point itself, I was like, why are we learning all of this? I don't want to be doing this part in the future. But now as a software engineer, you do kind of need to understand what are user stories to just function in a team. When your project manager tells you what to do, this is the story, and this is the reason why we're doing this task, it's quite important to just understand. You don't need to know in detail, but just understand why you're doing certain things. What is a story actually? I think understanding this does help communicate in the future world, especially when you're communicating with people who are not engineers. For electrical side of things, one module that was really fun was EE2024. This was programming for computer interfaces. And in the first part of the module, we actually learned assembly. But I really liked assembly. It was so much fun. And the first task that we had was to write a code in assembly and to also write the same function in C. And we had to optimize the assembly code so much such that it would actually run faster than the C code. I didn't know this was possible. But after understanding how registers actually work, or what's the optimal way to do things, we ended up switching it up until the assembly code was actually running faster than the C. I really enjoyed the whole process, and understanding like the lower level of things was really quite interesting. The second assignment was quite mad. We had to program a LPC microprocessor in C. So this module wasn't so much about the C part of things. It really wasn't about the programming side. But I think for me, the hardest part was debugging the hardware, understanding how the hardware actually works. Because the programming side is like, if you know that you're supposed to do ABC, you can just code out ABC. But the hard part was like knowing what you're supposed to code. And that was the conceptual knowledge around hardware. So this module definitely taught me a lot about that. I'm not working with like microprocessors now, but it was really, really interesting to see other aspects to technology, especially in the hardware side of things. So that's why I think this module was like really fun to understand lower level technologies and languages as well. The last module I want to talk about for year 2 was not an electrical module, not a computing module, but a GEM module. So I didn't talk about GEMs yet. But basically in NUS, we had to take 5 compulsory GEMs, which is general education modules. I didn't really enjoy a lot of the GEM mods. I would usually just take those that my friends are taking, but I enjoyed this one. So I took this one module called How the Ocean Works. I just took it because my friends were taking it, and some senior told us that this was an easy A module. And I really, really hated geography back in secondary school. I didn't take geography ever in any of the subjects I had the ability to choose, so I'm definitely not a geog person. And I thought this is what this module was going to be about, which it was to a certain extent, but it talked a lot about the ocean. And the professor was so good. Like, he would have really cool assignments during lectures, and he would like give us a big world map during the lecture and then let us shade like different regions and understand how the ocean is actually important for us, how it affects our life, all those type of things. Along the way, I actually started to learn things, understand things, and like kind of appreciate like the ocean. The final assignment for this module was also to create a presentation. The professor was so cool that he said you can present anything under the sun. And this was awesome because me and my friends ended up presenting about Maldives, which is basically a country that is surrounded by water. And we talked about the atolls there, and I learned so much. I would not look at Maldives the same way again. Like, I just have more appreciation for the country. And yeah, I have more appreciation for the ocean as well. So, great module. Okay, so year 3. This was a very, very special year for me. It was probably my favorite out of all 4 because I didn't choose to go for student exchange. Instead, I went for this other program called NUS Overseas Colleges. We basically got to learn about entrepreneurship, but along with that, we got to choose one of the colleges. There's a Shanghai College, there's a Silicon Valley College, New York, a lot of others as well. And out of these colleges, we basically got to choose one. You would apply for it if you got into the program. Then you got to go to that country, you got to study at a partner university, and at the same time, you got to do an internship for an entire year. So it was basically a intern and study at the same time sort of program. That's where it gets different from study abroad, which is where you're studying and you're living in the hostel and stuff. While for us, because we were interns, we got paid. We got to live with like the other interns and rent houses. We had our own social security numbers. We had to pay taxes. So I went to the Silicon Valley College where our partner university was Stanford. So I got to do an internship in the Bay Area. Specifically, I was in San Francisco because my company was in San Francisco. We got to take modules at the partner university, which is Stanford. We got to take mostly entrepreneurship modules, so you can choose to take other modules as well. The entrepreneurship modules were alright. They were not very theoretical. Instead, we had to do a lot of projects. It's an awesome program if you want to pursue entrepreneurship or you want to learn more about it, or if you want to start your own company, because as part of some of the entrepreneurship modules that we took, we even got to pitch an idea to investors, which is basically NUS itself. If they liked our idea, they would actually give us $10,000, like our team, to be able to pursue this idea after we're back in Singapore. My team actually won the $10,000 and we did try to pursue our idea, but it didn't go as expected. Working in a company and learning what the technologies that I did can also be considered as a final year project. So I also got to do that in year 3 itself. I think my whole NSC NOC experience can be a video on its own because it was a very, very fruitful, memorable, and eventful journey. I don't know if anyone really knows about NOC or wants to know more. So if you are very interested about the program itself and you want me to make a video specific to that, then do let me know. If not, yeah, that's about it for year 3. Okay, so year 4. So in terms of modules, I didn't take a lot of computing modules this year because I felt that in year 3 during my internship where I was working as a software engineer, I did get to learn a lot about the software side of things, but I did want to try out or touch more on the electrical stuff just to see if there's still interest there. I also had a few compulsory modules to clear, which I had to do in order to graduate. These were a lot of the level 3000, level 4000 mods and specific to engineering. One module that I absolutely loved, and it was one of my favorite modules in my 4 years, was my CG 3207, which is computer architecture. The professor in this module was incredible. I really like all of his modules so far. I really like modules that are very project heavy, and this one was. And even though this was computer architecture and it was quite a lot of hardware stuff involved, the theories and the concepts learned from this, I can still apply them to my daily job as a software engineer. The module basically went in depth about the CPU. We learned about single cycle processors, why is pipeline important, how is pipeline introduced, input, output, memory systems, and basically how everything works together. He also touched upon how things used to be and how they are now, so he showed a lot of improvements in technologies, which I thought were really cool to learn about, because even now when we build software systems, you also constantly need to think about optimization. So understanding how historically things have been optimized the way they are now will also help me as an engineer be able to optimize things in the future as well. Another module that was super fun was my embedded systems module. I really enjoyed this mod. I went into it with not much expectations. Usually in the past, whenever you're given project mates, you get to choose your own ones. But in this module, it was given by random. So I was grouped with people who I didn't really know, but everyone was really nice, so it was nice to work with them. This module was extremely project heavy. We basically just had one project, but it was a very big and long project. We were each split up into teams of 6. Within the team of 6, we were split up into 3 different sections. So there's software, hardware, and communications. I took the software section, and I had another buddy who was doing the software stuff with me. Module basically had teams to do a certain task nearing the end of the semester. You'd be graded based on how well you do that task. In our case, the task was to design a wearable system that helps detect dance moves. It involved all 3 components. You needed the hardware, such as where the sensors should be placed, how the sensors are connected. You needed the communication to be the middleman between the hardware and the software. And the software was basically in charge of analyzing the data and being able to detect what dance move the person did. So it's like, if I wear a device here and I raise my hand, it should appear on the screen that I'm doing the dance move, raise hand. During the software side of things, I had to make use of machine learning. So we both had to first collect a lot of data. And because each person's physiology is different, so we had to collect a ton of data to be able to make sure that we detect the move no matter who is the one doing it on the final day itself. A lot of data collection, data normalization, trying to come up with a model that we need. I think we ended up going with KNN. The final day was great as well. So it was a very good module. At the end of the day, I had a lot of fun. The last 2 modules I'm going to talk about are not technical. One is a gem and one is an extra module. I had like credits left that I can make use of. So even though I didn't need it to graduate, I just thought like, why not do it? Because I had free time. So let's talk about the gem first. I also took this because I wanted to take a mod with my friend and I just had to clear it. It was my last semester. The module was basically about South Asians in Singapore. So it was quite relatable because I am South Asian and my parents did migrate to Singapore. And it was really interesting to just learn about the South Asian diaspora, how like years ago, the first few South Asians who moved over to Singapore, who were they, and how they made a difference to the country. As well as it was really cool to know like the impact that they had on the formation of Little India, how streets in Little India are named. So it's actually really cool to know all these things that I never knew before. Okay, the last non-technical module I took was a theatre studies module. And I took this because I told myself before I graduate, I want to take one module that I would never imagine myself taking. And theatre studies is definitely it. I wouldn't say it was life-changing, but it was perspective-changing because the module consisted of theory parts and practical parts. I'll talk about theory first. It talked about the different styles of theatre or traditions behind theatre, the different ways to emote. Okay, I'm a person who loves black and white. I like things to be right or wrong. and I enjoy that. The grey area somewhat scares me. So I think that's why I couldn't appreciate the theory part of it as much. But the practical part was really fun, hard, and I appreciate people who do theatre or any other performance arts. We were given the ability to put up 2 plays, and my team was amazing. I loved all of the people in my team. It was just so much fun. We got to choose what script we wanted, and we got to decide on sound, how the stage looked, any props that we needed, what our costumes would be. So yeah, this module really helped me to form an appreciation for the arts or theatre itself. So this is it for my NUS computer engineering degree. Now looking back 2 years later after I graduated, I think it was a really fun experience. I wouldn't give it up for the world. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. I had so much fun reminiscing the modules that I took and remembering the cool and fun mods, and also thinking about those that I would not want to take again. But if you have any questions, do let me know in the comments below. That's it for now. See you in the next one.